Hi, and welcome back to Timewalk. Tonight, our time walker is walking into Rome, the eternal city, the city the Romans built on a graveyard. Beneath the marble streets lie 700 years of graves, and the empire never once apologized. Let's follow her.
There is a city in Italy where the streets are paved with marble, where 1 million people live and trade and argue, and where the dead outnumber the living by 1,000 to 1. This morning I am walking into it. They call it the Eternal City, but the more accurate name would be the City of the Dead, because everything I am standing on right now was somebody's grave. Rome was not founded on hills. It was founded on a cemetery, before there was a forum, before there was an empire, before there was anything that looked like a city. This valley was where the first Romans buried their dead. And the Romans being Romans, they built a city right on top of it. They paved over the graves, raised temples over the tombs, and never once apologized. Here is what the ground under the forum actually looks like. Excavators found it in the 1900s, and what they found was a graveyard that had been there for 700 years before the first temple was raised. 700 years of graves, layer after layer. The earliest Romans burned their dead and sealed the ashes in clay urns, sometimes with a sword, sometimes with a cup, sometimes with nothing at all. Now here is the part that gets me. The Romans wrote laws about this. In 451 BC, the 12 Tables, their first written law, said no dead body may be buried inside the city, period. So they moved the dead outside the walls. They lined the roads with tombs, built whole cemeteries along the highways, and called the busiest one the Street of Tombs. It worked beautifully for about 100 years, because the city kept growing, and every time it grew, it swallowed another cemetery. The walls moved out, and suddenly the tombs that used to be outside were inside, and the law just quietly forgot to notice. So the Romans did the only sensible thing. They paved over the cemeteries, built apartments on the mass graves, and told themselves the dead did not mind. If you want to see where the city really hides its dead, you go to the Esquiline hill. For centuries, it was where the city dumped the bodies of the poor, the slaves, and the forgotten. They called the pits paticuli, which is a polite Latin word for rotting pits. Tens of thousands of bodies went into them, unburned, unremembered, and unnamed. No one knows how many thousands of people lie in that hill. What we do know is that when the emperors wanted a grand garden, they picked the Esquiline. They built the gardens of Maecenas right on top of the pits. The rich strolled among the fountains, and underneath their sandals the poor of Rome lay packed in pits, 20 deep. Nobody mentioned it. Everybody knew. And it is not just the Esquiline. Rome is built on bones everywhere. The catacombs under the city hold the remains of 500,000 people, and those are just the ones we have counted. 500,000, in tunnels that run for hundreds of miles under the streets where people buy bread and argue about politics and fall in love. Here is the thing about Roman death. It was not quiet and it was not private. Death was a public event with its own industry, its own rules, and its own prices. There were professional mourners you could hire. There were flute players for the procession. There were men who did nothing but carve the tombstones that lined every road out of town. And the tombstone industry was enormous because every Roman who could afford it wanted to be remembered. They wrote whole life stories on their stones. They listed their jobs, their titles, and their virtues. One famous stone in the city says only this: I was a slave, I lived, I loved, I am no more. And under it, the man who paid for the stone added, walk on, traveler, and smile. Because that was the Roman attitude in the end. The dead were not scary, they were neighbors. The city did not wall itself off from death. It just built upward and let the dead keep the ground floor. You can see it today if you know what to look for. The city is a layer cake. The bottom layer is a cemetery. The top layer is an empire. Let me show you the best graveyard in Rome. Not the biggest, the best. The Isola Sacra, a small island at the mouth of the Tiber, where the people who served Rome's great port were buried. These were not emperors. These were shipwrights, fishmongers, doctors, and ferrymen, middle-class Romans, each in their own small brick house of death. And here is what their tombstones say. They say things like, "Here lies a baker who made the best bread in Ostia. Here lies a girl who died at 12, loved by her parents. Here lies a man who never lied. The Romans believed you carried your reputation with you. So the dead spent their lives building the words that would outlive them, and the words are still here, but not everyone could afford a tomb." Rome's poor had a different arrangement. When they died, their families pooled their money with other families and bought a shared tomb, like a small apartment building for the dead. They called it a columbarium, which means a dovecote, because the niches looked like a wall of bird boxes. Hundreds of people could be housed in one room, each in a pot the size of a loaf of bread. And then there are the emperors. Rome buried its emperors in style. The first of them built a tomb so big it took a century to finish properly. Augustus built his mausoleum to hold his whole family. Inside, the ashes of the man who founded the empire sat in a golden urn, guarded by the city he had built on the graves of its ancestors. But here is the twist the city loves. The tomb of Augustus was later turned into a fortress, then a garden, then a concert hall. The emperor who ordered the empire's dead to stay outside the walls now has tourists sitting on his bones. And the man who wrote the law about not burying people inside the city, his own ashes are inside the city. Rome does not care about your laws. Rome outlives them. Now I want to take you to the most famous road in Rome, the Via Appia, the queen of roads, the highway that ran all the way to the sea, and the entire length of it, on both sides, is a graveyard. For miles, for dozens of miles. When the Romans built a road, they built it through their dead, so that every traveler would remember who lived here and who mattered. Some of these tombs are enormous. The tomb of a baker named Eurysaces is shaped like a giant bread oven because that is what he made for a living. The city's richest baker is still selling bread 2,000 years later. The Romans called this kind of monument a showpiece. A man could spend a fortune on his tomb, and it was money well spent, because the tomb was the last thing anybody would ever know about him. And that is the thing about this city. It is not morbid. It is practical. The Romans looked death in the face, priced it, built for it, and then went back to arguing about politics. Dying in Rome was like paying your taxes. You knew it was coming, you planned for it, and the planning produced some of the most beautiful things the city ever built. There is one more thing I need to tell you, and it is the thing that makes this city different from every other city on earth. The dead here are not in a cemetery. The dead here are everywhere. Under the bakeries, under the baths, under the temples, under the houses where children are learning to read, there is a grave. Not sometimes, not often, always. The archaeologists say that when you dig in Rome, you do not hit water. You hit bones first, then more bones, then eventually a sewer or a street or another grave. Every time the city puts up a new building, they find a cemetery first. They have found whole streets of tombs, whole districts of the dead, right under the coffee shops. Now I want to show you the strangest grave in this entire city. In the year 2020, archaeologists digging under the Forum found a stone box, and inside it, they believe, was the tomb of Romulus himself. Romulus, the man who, according to legend, founded this city by plowing a furrow and killing his own brother. The man whose city is the one I am walking through right now. They found it under the black stone, the Lapis Niger, the oldest shrine in the Forum, a block of black marble that the Romans themselves did not understand and were afraid to move. The Romans left it alone for 2,000 years because the inscriptions warned that whoever disturbed it would be cursed, and when the archaeologists finally looked under it, they found a grave. So here is the whole city in one image. the most powerful empire the world has ever known, built by a man whose own grave sits at its center, hidden under a black stone that everyone was too afraid to move. Rome does not hide its dead. Rome builds on them. Rome rules from on top of them. And Rome, in the end, is remembered because of them. But the dead were not just in the ground. They were in the law. Rome had whole professions built around death. The undertakers, the mourners, the flute girls, and the stone carvers all lived off the city's obsession with remembering. And the law protected the dead. It was illegal to disturb a grave. It was illegal to steal from a tomb. The dead had rights in Rome, and the living had to respect them. Some graves even carried their own insurance. Families joined burial clubs, paid a little money every month, and the club guaranteed them a proper funeral and a shared tomb. Rome's poor planned for death together. It is the most Roman thing I have seen all day. Even the poorest people in the city organized death the way they organized everything else, together with rules and with money. And here is where the story turns. Because this city of the dead, this city that buried its past and paved over it, did something no empire before it had ever done. It refused to die. Rome fell, the empire fell, but the city itself never stopped. It kept building, kept burying, kept paving over its own history, layer after layer for 2,000 years. Under the churches of Rome, you can still walk through the pagan tombs they were built on. Under the bakeries, the baths, under everything, the dead are still there, keeping their old appointments. And every time the city digs for a new subway line, it finds another graveyard. The metro builders of Rome have to stop and let the archaeologists go first, always. Before I leave, I want to show you one last grave. It is not famous. Nobody writes about it. It is a small stone in a field, and it belongs to a slave named Carpus. The stone says that Carpus was the head of the family's household, that he managed their accounts, that he lived 60 years, and that his masters raised the stone because they genuinely liked him. And here is the thing. Carpus died 1,800 years ago, and I am standing here reading his name. His masters wanted to be remembered. The emperors wanted to be remembered. But it is the slave who is still being read. That is what this city is underneath all the marble. Not an empire, a conversation. The dead wrote their names, and the living keep reading them century after century. I came here expecting to see the greatest city of the ancient world. Temples, arches, palaces, baths. I did see all of that. But what I will remember is the ground. Every road, every piazza, every foundation is sitting on somebody's story. The Romans did not bury their past. They paved over it and kept walking. The people are gone, but the stones remember, and that is the most Roman thing of all. They built a city so solid that even their graves became foundations. I am Aubrey, and I have been walking on the bones of Rome. If you want to come with me on the next walk, subscribe, and I will see you at the next graveyard. So here is what Rome taught me today. Every city is built on somebody, every sidewalk covers a story, and the dead are never really gone as long as somebody reads their names. Rome outlived its empire because it never stopped remembering. It kept the dead close, it built on them, talked to them, and in its own strange way loved them. I am Aubrey, and this was the eternal city, not because the stones last forever, but because the names do. And now, so does this walk. If you want to come with me, subscribe, and I will see you at the next one. The people are gone, the walls remember, and the dead, if you listen, will tell you where to walk next.
The people are gone, but the stones remember. If this walk surprised you, subscribe and ring the bell. Every walk, every week. History's waiting, and I'll see you in the past.